as you know, in this series, what we've been exploring is how the spiritual path itself needs to evolve and is evolving to serve the spiritual and evolutionary challenges of our moment in history, as well as what we might call the spiritual and evolutionary needs of postmodern and integral human beings. And you're someone who's played a huge role in Integral Spiritual Center and now Integral Life Spiritual Center and your new pioneering project, I Evolve. And within the whole integral spirituality conversation, I've noticed one area that seems to be getting a lot of attention in recent years is the role of what's known as shadow work or working on the shadow. And, you know, in its vernacular usage, I mean, shadow gets thrown around and is used to refer to many different things. In general, you could say shadow means the dark side of anything. You hear people, or even the potential dark side of anything. You know, for instance, some people might say, well, the shadow of confidence is arrogance, meaning, you know, if confidence is a good thing, but it can lead to arrogance. Or people would say, well, the shadow of religion is fundamentalism, meaning, you know, religion gone bad becomes that. But I know when you and other integralists are referring to the shadow, you mean something very specific. And I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit about what you mean by the shadow and help kind of take us into that understanding.
Yeah. Well, let me just first affirm what you're saying, just that the entire discussion that we'll be having today about shadow practice takes place in a context where reality does have a tendency to show up, at least in our own mind, in terms of opposites. In the Buddhist tradition, we would talk about it, the fundamentally dualistic nature of mind, so that where we see black, we experience white, or where light emerges, there's shadow, or where we anticipate good, something bad may arise. And so that there's always this coupling, and as we move through this conversation about shadow, we'll talk a lot about working with dualism and polarity. But to be more specific, in relationship to integral spiritual practice and what Ken Wilber and our colleagues at the Integral Life Spiritual Center have started to develop, and then obviously with the other communities that we're starting to work with and interface with, and Andrew Cohen's community and the others who are involved in our experiment together, one of the assumptions is that for many people who've practiced within within the traditions, within lineages, within a very defined spiritual practice, that the traditions themselves tend not to integrate some of the insights of psychology, and that a truly postmodern spirituality would, by its nature, need to integrate insights from psychology, from science, from democracy, from those kind of innovations that are part of the modern and the postmodern age. So when we talk about shadow in this context, most fundamentally what we're talking about is an expression of Jung's, of Carl Jung, that describes really the unconscious part of our awareness, which for whatever reason, it's either too painful, it's unacceptable, it's shameful, it creates great anxiety, whatever it is, we're not able to bring it into our awareness. We're not able to experience it in our first person, state of I, and therefore, because we can't experience it as I, it tends to show up in other ways, because the mind is a beautifully creative, innovative mechanism, as you know, and what's held as the identity as I or not I is very fundamental in some ways in human development. So what I allow to be experienced as me is very particular, and there are certain things that I cannot consciously experience as me. So therefore, they come out in my dreams, they come out in my projections, they come out in my aspirations on the world, they come out in my demands on other people, but I can't actually feel and see and experience them in my first person. So an example, just a very quick example would be, and we've probably all had this experience, I'm not angry, you are. I'm not racist, they are. I'm not controlling, he is. So it's a very simple displacement of an experience that we can't seem to tolerate in our first person.